Welcome everybody to our third issue of the Integrated Eligibility webinar series for community partners. This is your community partner outreach program, and we're here to bring you ongoing learning about the upgraded
I am busy.
Integrated Eligibility
Go away. Go
program.
away. Unless someone's dying.
And I have made sure to mute everybody. All of you are on mute. What we will do is we'll go through 3 separate topics here, and we'll take a pause after each one for questions. And we have a whole team of people that have brought you this webinar. So before I go into that, I'm going to let you know that today's 3 topics are: first, we're going to outline the options for associating a community partner to a case. We have shared lots of that information in the past, but not all in one location. So that's what we're doing today. We'll take questions about it. And then we're going to share the new miscellaneous document upload feature on the applicant portal. You'll have an opportunity for questions after we share that. And then we're going to revisit what we talked about last time. We are going to review and clarify asset verification, which is something that is needed for some of the non-MAGI medical programs. And we're going to talk about this form MSC 2639, when you might see it, when it might be needed, and what you might be able to do to help. So this webinar was brought to you by a bunch of folks that are here to support you as community partners in the work that you do. We know how important the work is that you do. We know how hard you work, and we know what you're trying to go through to get coverage and access for your clients. So we really acknowledge that. I'm happy to say that our agency is very aware of the depth of your work. And because of that, we have external communications behind you. We have processing teams behind you. We have process teams, which are actually a little bit different than processing. And we have the policy teams for both the MAGI and the non-MAGI medical. We have the OHA Community Partner Outreach Program. Jessica Diaz and myself, Deanna Simon, we're going to be presenting today. And we have other integrated eligibility subject matter experts as well. And it's our subject matter experts who will be answering your questions after Jessica and I present the main content. But first, I'm going to pass it over to Jessica to give a quick overview of integrated eligibility, or IE as we refer to it. And these days, we're really referring to it as the upgraded one system. And we're going to go through some very basics just to make sure everybody's on the same page, spend a little bit of time, and then we'll launch into the deeper content. So Jessica, I'm going to hand it to you.
Thank you so much, Deanna. And as a heads up for the folks who are on, the handout is now up. So that is there. So as Deanna said, we're going to go through a quick round of just some basic terms and definitions so that we make sure we're all starting from a shared understanding. Next slide, please. So some terms, acronyms, and definitions. You may hear folks say ET, which means eligibility transformation. That's really the people part of the big upgrade process. So it's the ways in which workers are doing their work and the business processes that have been designed for them. And then IE, or integrated eligibility, is really the technology portion of this. So it's the system itself and what the system can do and the ways in which it's changed. We have been calling it the integrated one system or the upgraded one system. So that is the system that we are working in when we are determining eligibility, when we are helping people with applications. It is still applicant portal and worker portal, just like it was before. And it is accessible to our workers, our community partners, and Oregonians at large. So anytime you hear people say one nowadays, we are probably referring to the new upgraded integrated version of the system. And another term you might hear for the older system is MAGI one, because before July 6th of last year, the one system could only hold the rules for MAGI medical programs, which is sort of what we as the Community Partner Outreach Program have been more used to playing in sort of that sandbox. Some other terms, so storefront office, or SFO, is essentially any ODHS office where a client could walk into. So that serves folks directly, they can walk into it, as opposed to, and next slide, the VEC, or Virtual Eligibility Center, which is an office that has no front door for customers, but does a lot of the work that ODHS does when it comes to eligibility for the different programs. So VEC is singular. It's a series of offices around the state where the non-face-to-face work happens. And that's an internal term. The external term that we use is One Customer Service Center. It's sort of how we used to call it the OHP Processing Center or OHP Customer Support. It's the same number that folks used to use to get to the MAGI eligibility help is now for a whole host of benefits. And so that customer service center is open 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. And many of you will be familiar with this 1-800-699-9075 number. So I mentioned applicant portal and worker portal. Just like in MAGI 1, we have these two different sides of the system. So applicant portal is where Oregonians apply and community partners also have their admin access. And then there's also worker portal, which is a more in-depth access into the system that eligibility workers use in order to fully process eligibility. Zooming through. We've talked about MAGI, which is sort of that traditional OHP or Medicaid as we know it. We also have non-MAGI medical programs that's new to many of us. These are Medicaid programs for folks who are blind, disabled, or 65 plus, and that includes programs like Medicare savings programs and also does include long-term care services. These programs have different eligibility requirements than the MAGI ones, and so there are new rules and new questions built into the one system to accommodate that. Another term that we've been talking about a lot in these webinars recently is AVS, Asset Verification System, which is one of the systems that we at the state use to verify reported assets, look for things that are not reported. Think of it as one of the many systems that we ping in order to make sure we have all the information we need on a case. Running AVS is a condition of eligibility for many folks on non-MAGI medical programs. And that brings us to the MSC 2639, which is the form that is needed to get permission to run this asset verification when that is required by a program. And then, yep. So a brief overview just to make sure we're all starting from the same place when it comes to medical programs. We want to reiterate that the upgraded one system now includes both MAGI and non-MAGI medical in one application. So people don't have to know that they want to apply for a specific medical program. They apply and then the system determines what they're eligible for. So we can now help folks with MAGI medical, also known as that traditional OHP, non-MAGI medical benefits, which includes OSIP-M for blind, disabled, 65 plus, as well as those Medicare savings programs. And also we can start the process to look into getting folks long-term care services within the application. Different medical programs have different eligibility criteria. So we do need to make sure we're not sort of guiding folks in any particular direction, but we are answering as accurately as possible. And Upgraded One, just to reiterate, does ask more questions, and those questions are there for a reason. It's because it helps us to determine folks for a larger range of programs than we did in the past. And to put all of those words I just said into a diagram to make it maybe a little easier to digest, we have Medicaid packages, or you might hear it called public medical. That includes that MAGI OHP and the whole host of programs within it. It includes OSIP-M and the whole host of programs within it. That does include CAWM, so there's the full OHP benefit, there's Citizen Alien Waived Emergent Medical, CAWM Plus. Folks who are on OSIP-M or MAGI OHP may qualify for long-term care if they have that service need. And then I think one of the groups that is sort of easiest for us to not fully understand or consider part of the Medicaid package is these Medicare savings programs, which are programs in Medicaid to help folks pay for their Medicare, which is why Medicare is in the name, even though it is a Medicaid package or program. So there's the whirlwind update and grounding, and I'm going to hand it back over to Deanna.
Thank you, Jessica. So we already covered today's topic and cadence, but here is again after the overview, just to bring us back to our topics of how to associate a community partner to a case, new miscellaneous document upload feature, and asset verification. So we'll get into the weeds now. Our first topic is how to get associated to a case. And like I said, many of you know at least pieces of this, but we get a lot of questions about the full picture. So this is the first time we're putting it all together in one place. We want to make sure you have an opportunity to wrap your head around it and use all these different pieces of the puzzle. So you can get associated to a case in various ways. That is what you want to do in order to be able to see your client in the applicant portal in your dashboard, or to be able to advocate for them with the processing center. You can do that in various ways. The first one is that when you submit a new application in the Upgraded One system, this community partner that's filling out that application, as well as their entire organization, is automatically associated to that case. And this is also a good time to remind everybody that in your organization, you will all be considered admin level users. So each individual in your organization can access the cases from all the other individuals within your organization. You will automatically be associated to that case when you start an application. I think you probably all know that at this point. A new feature in the applicant portal is that if you start a new application for an individual with an active case, you can have them automatically pop up in your applicant portal. This is something community partners have been asking for years, and we have finally been able to accommodate it for many cases. And here are the limitations. If you have a primary applicant who already has a case and who is now working through you and comes and says, I would like you to help me, for example, report a change. As long as they don't have another CP association, you can start a new application for that individual, and they will auto-populate in your dashboard after they enter their name and their birth date and their social if they have one. It will then search the system, it will find that person, and they will populate in your applicant portal. You'll then be able to navigate to your dashboard to access that existing case. That's a new feature. I hope many of you have discovered it. If you haven't, then when somebody comes to you and says, I already tried applying on my own, but now I need help, you can try this, and I've heard it is working really nicely. And we do want to offer a cautionary note. You shouldn't remove any household members who pre-populate from other programs. So for example, you might have somebody come to you and say, well, we just have our core folks who want to apply for medical, but on their case that pre-populates, they might have other individuals who are part of their SNAP or their TANF case. You don't want to remove those individuals. They can stay there. They're part of their whole case with all the integrated programs, and you can just select who wants to apply for medical. Okay, so that's number two. And it's actually really exciting. We love that feature. So we hope that all of you are doing the happy dance for that if you didn't already know about it. The third way that you can do it is you can send a consent form, which is now called an authorization form. So hopefully you've all seen the memo that we have a new consent form. It is called an authorization form. There's going to be some confusion about those two terms, but we're going to use them interchangeably right now. You can send that authorization form to the Oregon.benefits email that you're all very familiar with, I'm sure. And if you write the words consent form only in the subject line, that alerts the processing teams that it is a single, simple task. They look daily for those, they pull them, and they process them. So even when the Oregon.benefits email general response time is delayed by several or more days, you can get your consent form sent in to get associated to your case or your client by writing consent form only in the subject line. and that is working. Let's see. The next way to do this is to call the CP line to expedite that association. So if you have somebody sitting in front of you right now and you can't wait a few hours for the processing teams, the email teams, to find that email, then after you send that email, you can call the community partner line. There is still an option, it's number 2, and it's if you have a consent form and you need to be associated to a case. That connects you to a team of people who have a singular task. Their only task on that line is to pull consent forms from the Oregon.benefits email that they do have access to, and to associate you as a community partner to that case. So if you need to expedite it, you email it first, then you call. It should be a short wait time if all goes well, because it's not a highly used function, and you should get what you need right away. I do want to give a reminder at the very bottom here, the little asterisk, that consent forms or authorization forms need to be sent into the agency for every form that was signed remotely. So during COVID, we have special permissions. You can have the consent gathered remotely, but then we do need a copy of that form. And you can submit it to the agency either by sending it to the Oregon.benefits email, or, little teaser here, by uploading it at the end of the application to the miscellaneous document upload screen, which we'll show you in a minute. The authorization form is the 6610. That's still what it's called. It is still available on the forms server and on group site. And now we're going to move on to questions. So I'm going to ask Jessica to manage the questions that are about this topic. It's a 1-slide topic.
Yeah, I would say we have a statement, which I will read out, which is that when it comes to that automatic association, this does not work if a case is stuck in conversion, and that is true. If a case is stuck in conversion, then we'll need to include a human to help work out that CP association.
And if you have more questions about conversion, you can listen to our IE webinar from January.
And then, yes, the 6610, so we are not putting it on group site because it really is the form server where the most up-to-date versions live, and we want to make sure that we don't accidentally end up keeping old versions of that form up, but know that it is available in PDF form. The PDF is fillable, but it has a fancy electronic signature, so that may or may not serve your needs great during the COVID emergency and remote assistance. There's also a Word document version that it's a text, you can type every section in, including the signature. Someone is asking about, clarify what it means to pre-populate.
In the past, when somebody had a case and you tried to help them apply in the applicant portal, it would give you a hard stop after you entered their name and their birth date and their social, if they have one. It would say, I'm sorry, this person is already known to the system. They cannot use the applicant portal to apply and you can't use the applicant portal to help them with their case until you work with the processing center to get associated to them, and then you can search for them and pull up their case from your applicant portal dashboard. You no longer get that hard stop as long as you're working with the primary applicant, they're not already associated to a different community partner, and they're not in conversion. But we may have some more questions about that, and we may have other subject matter experts to answer, because I don't know exactly what it looks like. I do know that you need to navigate to your dashboard to access that existing case. But Jessica or any other subject matter experts, do you have anything else to add to that?
I think we are lacking our subject matter expert on the ins and outs of applicant portal, but my understanding is that when you click to move forward, it'll say, hey, we found someone. Do you want to go to their dashboard? If you say yes, you'll go straight to their dashboard where you can then start up the application or report a change.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions on this topic?
We have a few on consent forms. Do we need a consent form signed and emailed even if we complete an application via one?
Thank you for asking that. I'm going to point everybody down to this asterisk at the very bottom, which is that it is a condition of the special permission we have during the COVID emergency period. We have the special permission to do remote assistance, but we also have a requirement that if we do that remote assistance, we must, you as a community partner, must submit the consent form to the agency so we have that on record and we know that it was a remote assistance situation. So the answer is yes. If you assist somebody remotely, even through the applicant portal, you must submit a copy of the signed authorization/consent form.
Yes,
Does that
and
answer
of
the
course,
question?
even if you are helping someone in the one system, you always do need a consent form first. I think we have some questions about availability of the form, so I will tackle that offline and maybe. Whew. Okay, yeah, I think we might have to return to this topic later because we're getting a lot of great questions that are pretty, some of them are pretty in depth. So noted, and I'm sorry we don't have all the answers for you today.
All right, should we move on to the next topic?
I think so. Okay,
and as a reminder, we do have an hour and 15 minutes. We made this a longer webinar, so we do have until 10:15. Oh, look at that, questions about associating to a client. All right, our next topic is miscellaneous document upload. We have a new feature in the upgraded one that allows you to upload optional documents at the end of every application. Now, the first thing we want to call out is that the wording on this page may be confusing. It says, and I circled it here in red, we need proof to see if you are eligible. Not necessarily. This page shows all the time, regardless of whether there are required proofs or not. So the wording there is potentially confusing. We wanted to call it out. This is an optional page. It does show for every applicant portal application, and it shows for all renewals and every time that you report a change as well. So you'll have those different options or time points when this appears. And it appears at the very end of the application after thank you for submitting screen. Now, if there's a required RFI on that case, for example, if somebody needs to supply proof of immigration status, it will show after the required RFI screen. So let's say you have somebody who needs to submit proof of immigration status and you would like to upload your consent form to the applicant portal because you are helping them remotely. You would then get to the end. It would say, thank you for submitting. It would give you the RFI screen for your proof of immigration status. You would upload those immigration documents. And after that, it would give you the miscellaneous document upload page. And on this separate page, you could then upload your consent form. You could also upload any other documents you need to submit here. Some examples might be if the person wants to submit proof of income, even though it's not required, or if the person wants to submit any other communications or documentation to support their case. You cannot upload Word documents or Excel files. They do need to be converted into one of the accepted file types, which is PNG, PDF, JPEG, or TIFF. But any of those can be uploaded here. It's important to note that the comments section has a red asterisk. That means it is required. If somebody is going to upload a file, comments about that file are required in order to give context to the workers so they know what they're looking for. You might say consent form attached for remote assistance, or you might say proof of income attached, or you might say letter is attached explaining whatever it is. I can't really accommodate all the situations, but there have been requests to be able to submit things that aren't required, and this is the function that has been granted in order to accommodate that. You should share the document type and why in the comments box. Now, this screen cannot be revisited once you pass it. You can't return to it. So you have this one opportunity. And after that, then you have to submit things through other mechanisms, such as the Oregon.benefits email. But we're very excited to have this screen, and especially right now during remote assistance times, when you need to submit a consent form for every case that is helped remotely, this is a great way to do it so you don't have to send a bunch of separate emails to the customer service center. So that was a pretty short topic, and now we have time for questions.
I don't think we have any questions yet. We are still on consent form in the question box.
Okay, well, do we want to take a moment to revisit consent form and ask any more questions about it? Or do we have any questions that we can answer at this time? Or any other contributions to the conversation?
I think that we have some open questions about if we get associated with the case and we find household members who we think are no longer part of the household, what do we do? But I do think because this starts to get tricky with the other programs in the one system, we might not have a yes/no answer right now.
Do we want to ask, yeah, I know that you're communicating with our subject matter experts in a chat on, in the background. So if somebody feels like they can answer that, great. If not, we can get back to folks. I do see a question here. I hear Jessica typing, so I'm going to chime in. It says, other than the consent form, is there another form we need to submit for phone applications? The answer is no. That authorization or consent form is the one you need to submit. It is not different for remote assistance. It just needs to be submitted. So typically, when you help somebody through the applicant portal in person, there is not a requirement to submit the consent form, only to keep it on file for 6 years. But if you're helping somebody not in person, rather remotely, then even if it's an applicant portal application, you do need to submit the consent or authorization form. So that's what that is about. It's not a separate form. It's just an additional process for us to capture that for the cases that you are assisting remotely. I'm going to move on to the next question since I think Jessica is still trying to get some answers. Does this screen appear for just the primary applicant, or does it appear for each individual? I see in the example that both individuals are showing. I'm going to go, thank you very much. That's the miscellaneous document. Sorry, we're popcorning back and forth now. This is a question about the miscellaneous document upload, and that is a great call out. Thank you. You are correct. This screen shows for every individual. The reason for that is that when you're submitting documentation, it needs to be submitted attached to an individual. So if you have a family of 2 and they are both immigrants and they both need proof of immigration status, you need to submit 2 separate documents, one for each person on each of their individual tabs. The same would be true for any other documents. If it's a document or a letter about Jane, you would click on Jane's tab. Now for the consent form, it is best to submit it on the tab of the primary applicant, but I'm not sure that's necessary because it's a consent form for the whole case.
I imagine it's whoever signed it, right?
That's a great point. That would be the best practice to follow. Yes, whoever signed the consent form, you should attach it to their tab. That would eliminate any confusions.
To continue ping-ponging, we have some answers for it. If we think that someone has left the household and they're showing up on a case because you've been connected to an old case that maybe does need updates, you can unclick the box that they are asking for medical, but then in order to verify if someone has truly left the household, really should have a conversation with an eligibility worker so that they can make sure there aren't any unintended consequences, because different programs do have different definitions of household. So if you are being associated with a case and then find some folks you don't expect to be on that case, there may or may not be a good reason they are still persisting on that case, and we should talk to the experts on it.
Seek counsel. Great. Thank you.
You all are asking a lot of great questions. I am struggling to keep up, but I'll do.
I see a question here that says, what about signature forms? Can we add those to the miscellaneous document upload? I'm not sure which signature forms you are referring to. So if you can clarify, Cecilia, that would be great. And then maybe we can give you a more complete answer. I see another question here about consent forms. At this time, what is the best way to catch up providing all consent forms for remote assistance? Is it best to send those via email? The answer is yes, it's best to send them via email, but I'm going to ask Joey Hill, who is from our processing team, to chime in and help give some guidance for how her teams would like to receive those.
Hey, this is Joey. I'm with what we call the Virtual Eligibility Center. For you all, that's the one customer service center. And I work closely with the processes around email. So to answer this question specifically, I agree completely. Sending them to Oregon Benefits is a fine approach. We would just ask that you send one consent form per email. It's easier for our staff to process that way.
I'm going to ask a question, Joey, on behalf of our community partners. What if a community partner didn't realize they were supposed to be doing this and they want to catch up now and they have 100 consent forms to send? Can they send them in batches if that's the case, or do you still need them individually?
We would still need them individually. And if that's the case, perhaps they can work with the ROC so that we can partner and work them in a different way.
Can they also fax them? Would that be an option?
I would hesitate with suggesting that, just because faxes typically come to us broken up, meaning that the actual pages may be split. So I wouldn't want to slow down the process for the partner.
Thank you. I'm looking through the questions to see what else we might have here.
And I think a distinction to make about like what we need to upload here versus what we can upload here, which is if there's anything on a case like a tricky income situation or something where someone wants to write out some clarification on what's going on with their household, this is a place where we now can put things. And sorry if you've already said this, Deanna, I've been all over the place. It's really an opportunity. It's completely optional. But if there's ever something where, gosh, if a worker could see this document, they'd understand much better what we put in the immigration status section or something like that. This is a great place for that.
That's a great clarifier. Thank you. All right. I think we've gotten through the questions. Jessica, with your permission, I'm wrong.
What's up?
I'm looking at the questions and I'm just making sure we're addressing them all. And I think we have addressed all the questions that we can about consent forms and case association.
Yeah, and I think just a quick, we know that we are not in a doing business as usual world right now and haven't been for a year, and we don't 100% know what it's going to look like when we get sort of back to normal whatever that's going to look like. But just know that we will continue to offer things like this so that as we learn about what is, like what the new rules are, what our new ways of doing business are, we will share it with you, but we don't have those answers yet. So I know there is some anxiety, and I understand it about like, what about when the emergency period ends and how are we going to do this? We'll be there with you, and we will be working alongside you to get to that.
I do see a question also about how to sign the remote consent form or the remote authorization form. We're not covering that in today's webinar, but I'm happy to send out the guide to remote assistance as a follow-up to this webinar. It can also be found on group site, and we do have guidance for that. So please look that up. It well complements the concept of how to get associated to a case. So thank you for mentioning that, and happy to provide that. All right, Jessica, should we move on or pause for more questions?
Let's move on. You all are welcome to keep putting stuff in the question box. I know that we may not get to everything, but that we are keeping an eye on and logging all of this. So please don't hesitate to put everything in there. And then if we don't get to it, know that we hope to in the future.
Great. Okay, now we're going to get into our deeper topic, which is asset verification. We're going to give you an overview, and we're going to go into some details, and we hope that today's clarifications really help build on what we learned during the last webinar and help you understand the process a bit more. I can say that we have also been learning, and we really appreciate the opportunity to learn along with you. Your questions help push our understanding. So, resource verification. Because we now have additional programs in the upgraded one system that includes the non-Magi programs, we have to ask sometimes about resources. Some of those non-Magi programs require us to count resources as part of the eligibility determination. And the applicant portal will ask about those resources when they are needed. When we ask about resources, there is an additional process. We then have to verify those assets. And so we're going to talk about what that verification process looks like, what the client can expect, and how you might be able to help. But this is the screen that you would see on the applicant portal application that would indicate to you this person is being evaluated for non-Magi medical programs, and we're going to need more information about their assets or their resources. We use the terms asset and resource interchangeably here. Right, and these are the list of all of the resources that we ask about. And as a reminder, as we know, hopefully at this point, the previous one system could only be used to help people apply for Magi OHP. Magi OHP does not look at resources, so you never would have seen those resource questions before. But the upgraded one also contains the application for the non-Magi medical programs. Those non-Magi medical programs have different eligibility criteria, and some of them do consider assets in the eligibility determination. So to verify those assets, ODHS works through various systems. For example, we might ping the DMV to look for and verify the automobiles or the vehicles that are registered under that person's name, and look for any additional vehicles that have not been disclosed. Another way that we verify assets, in addition to looking at DMV records, is something called the asset verification system. That's where we take all of the accounts and the properties that the person has reported, and we ping a system called AVS to verify those accounts and those properties, and also to look for undisclosed accounts and properties. So here are some details. When does ODHS need to run asset verification via asset verification system? AVS, as we call it for short, is needed only if the applicant might be eligible for some non-Magi medical programs. It's not needed if somebody is being evaluated for Medicare savings programs, or for those assumed eligible because they are eligible for or receiving SSI. But for the other programs, it is required. And if somebody needs to report resources, we need to verify them, and we need to run AVS. And AVS is a condition of eligibility. And I should have written here, it is not optional. So when we need it, we must run it. It is not an optional process, and it is not a manual process. It is also not a quick process. It can sometimes take up to 15 days to return results. And that is the reason why somebody receiving non-MAGI benefits is likely on a different time frame for when those benefits start compared to the MAGI benefits. Because that AVS can take up to 15 days. Not always, can be shorter, but it can be have that delay. Now, here's the tricky part. To run AVS, and we do lots of checks in the system, right? We ping all sorts of systems all the time to verify what the clients are reporting. But for AVS, we actually need a form. We need permission in order to run AVS. And the way the process works is applicants supply asset information during their non-MAGI interview. So if they're eligible or looking to be eligible for non-MAGI programs, then they will have a non-MAGI interview. During that interview, they must supply asset information. And ODHS then runs asset verification system to verify those reported assets and search for undisclosed ones. They need permission to do that. And that permission is granted through a form. That form, which we're becoming familiar with, is called the MSC 2639. Now here's the good news. And I'm going to go to the second piece of this slide first. No action is required from the CP at the time of the application. So it's not an extra form that you have to take care of. But understanding the process may be useful. And there may be cases where you might find yourself wanting to help the client submit the form. So the form, if it's requested, meaning if we need to verify assets because assets are counted, that form must be submitted in order to get benefits. That form gets collected, the information on it gets collected and signed during the non-MAGI interview. If married, the spouse must also sign because each applicant must give permission to the agency to run that check through AVS. So all of that is going to happen, in theory, in the non-MAGI interview. However, even though you don't need to do anything to help with this form when submitting an application, some applicants may not be able to collect or sign that form during the interview for one reason or another. For example, if there are two spouses, but only one of them is present for the interview, they will still need to get that form signed by the other spouse. Also, sometimes we've experienced where a community partner calls on a case, and that's what's holding up the case, is the fact that the asset verification permission form has not been signed by all the necessary people. So that is when a community partner might find themselves wanting to help a client finish that piece so that they can get their benefits, because it will hold up their benefits. So if a client needs help with that form, because they couldn't submit it in completion during the interview, then you can help in a few different ways. And we'll tell you in a moment how to get the form. But first, we're going to tell you how to help submit it. The best way to do it is to mail it or to drop it off at any APD or AAA office. That is the office that will ultimately process the form, use it to determine the eligibility for that client. So that is the most efficient and direct place to get the form submitted. And that's not the self-sufficiency office, just to be clear. That's actually the APD AAA office. So if you can do that, and you can do it at any APD or AAA office because they're all connected, they'll all upload that form into their collective system and get it to the right place. Now, if that's not possible, for whatever reason, the client can call the one customer service center and they can supply a verbal signature for that form. So that's another option. As a community partner, you can also upload it through the applicant portal if the opportunity presents itself. For example, if you're reporting a change or if they're in renewal, but the miscellaneous document upload screen at the end of the application is another place where you could upload that form. Uploading it at the time of application does not speed up the process because that form can't be actually used until after the non-Magi interview. But that is an option if you wanted to be proactive. And lastly, you can email it to Oregon.benefits email, but then they have to get to it in the queue. That could take some time. And then they have to forward it to the appropriate office. So it will eventually get where it's going, but it will take some time. So that would be the last option. So those are the different ways that you can help a client submit the form if it's needed. And you know it will be needed every time a client is asked about resources. If you don't do anything, that's okay too. This is not a required action. This is additional service for your clients if you'd like to help them complete the application if this form is holding up their benefits. It falls into the bucket of client advocacy and after application assistance. Again, it is optional, but we want to give you the tools in case you find yourself wanting to help. So the question might be, well, if somebody does have the asset screen show up on the applicant portal, we know that they're going to need AVS, so we know they're going to need to submit this form for permission. And if we want to help them, how can we do that? So something we should let you know is that even though it is basically a request for information, it's not going to show up in the applicant portal. So you won't see it there as an outstanding task. The reason for that is that the idea is it gets taken care of during the non-Magi interview. But if for some reason it can't be signed during the interview, it will be sent as a manual RFI later on. So if you need to get that form and help the client, it was sent to them, it will be sent to them at the mailing address on file if they were not able to do it during the interview. So they might have a copy of that form from their follow-up packet. But it's also available in the 7210 paper application packet as a supplemental form. You can get it from there. And you can also find it on the OHA DHS forms server. You can search for form 2639, and it's available in the same languages as the 7210, which is the full application. So it's available in a full suite of languages. All right, so that is our summary and our clarification about asset verification, the fact that we need to run AVS, which is pinging a certain system every time we need to look at somebody's assets and verify them and look for undisclosed assets. And we need permission in order to run that search. And we need a form in order to get that permission and where that form gets handled and where you might be able to find it if you want to help. So that was a lot of mouthfuls. We are now going to move over to questions, and we have a full 15 minutes for questions about this. So Jessica.
Oh boy. I want to start by thanking you all for having really robust, awesome questions. We have a really good one about that goes back a topic. Do we want to do that and then move into AVS, or should I save that for then? So the miscellaneous document upload, the question is, what if someone is working under a different name? Is this a good place to document that? And the answer is, and we've had furious typing in the background with our subject matter experts, is that, yeah, this is exactly the kind of thing where that miscellaneous document section can be really helpful because you can type or handwrite out an explanation of something that might look funny to an eligibility worker, like someone having a different name listed, and you can upload that into the miscellaneous document section. However, we did want to make a point that if this is due to a safety concern and having that visible to other household members could be a problem, that is a time when we'd want to take something like that directly to an eligibility worker at the one customer service center and have that conversation on the phone instead of leaving a written record if we think there might be any safety concerns.
Great clarification. Thank you.
And moving on to AVS and the MSC 2639, we have a question. What if someone is in the process of divorce or is legally separated, or if there is an abusive situation and disclosing the location of a spouse may be harmful? And we have, Janelle has keyed in that AVS can be waived in a domestic violence situation. And as long as an individual is still legally married, the spouse must sign the form. So if there is a DV piece to this, then that's once again talk to a worker, talk to a human about this. If you are getting questions and aren't sure how to proceed.
Would it be, this is Janelle, would it be
Oh.
easier for me to just go through those verbally? I'm trying to
Sure,
type
go
them out.
for it.
Okay, yeah, I'm like,
Yeah,
trying to
there's
get
a lot
through 'em
right
all bit. Okay, so so the next one was Form MSC 2639. If the client, oh, we already did that in the process of a divorce. So, sorry, the next one was about applying for QMB. AVS is not required for QMB or any of the Medicare savings programs because they don't consider resources. So the resource screen, if that's all that they're eligible for, will not even queue during the interview. What if they just received their stimulus and have not had time to use it? Will that affect eligibility? So it depends on which stimulus, but most of them are, they're not considered, they're excluded for a certain time frame after receipt of them. So I can't answer, we have a whole chart on all the stimuluses that have come out. And how they're used and excluded. So it just depends. If it was last year's stimulus and they still have money from that in the bank account, you know, and it's past the exclusion time frame, then it would be counted as a resource. So the worker is going to ask those additional questions during the interview to find out where the money in that bank account that is found may have come from, and if it's from a stimulus and whether it's counted or not. Next question is, what about if they're getting cash? Do they need to get a MSC 2639 form? Getting cash, asking for cash assistance, like,
I think it's TANF. I think that's what somebody's referring to. That's my guess.
okay, so the MSC 2639 is specifically for non-Magi medical programs. So it's not run for TANF or anything. It's only for non-Magi. The next question, is it still acceptable to refer clients to DHS for all the non-Magi benefit programs? I personally feel, oh, it looks like
Yeah, I can
you
pop
answered that one.
So
Okay.
yeah, I know a lot of folks are not really helping with non-Magi as much, or maybe don't feel confident yet on that, or feel like they should refer folks. That is always an option, but part of why we're here now is to try to like collect all of your questions and whatever it takes to get you to feel empowered to be able to help those folks. So more on that.
Okay, it says, are the APD workers initiating OHP applications for family members of their clients? So if you're talking about, you know, someone walks in and applies to an APD office and there's other people in the household, I may need more clarification on that one. I mean, they're going to enter everyone that's on the household and everyone that wants to apply, and that will start the application process. But they're not, I guess I'm not real sure what that question is.
Yeah, I believe so. APD workers are using the same application. They're on the other side of the system, but it's the same singular medical application, regardless of if it's Magi or non-Magi. So they should be going through all the same questions you are as CPs, and asking for the same definition of household as you are when it comes to medical applications. And if that's not happening, we love to hear about it and to troubleshoot what's going on.
Okay, and then Deanna answered the other one, the next one about the 7210 in chat, that the 2639 is not in the 7210, but it is part of the packet that is sent out. So it's a leaflet within it.
And yeah.
Go ahead.
A lot of people might not be ordering those paper application packets anymore, or haven't been, but I would encourage people to do so, to have some on file. Also, you can order the application guide that also comes with the application packet. So it actually is pretty handy, and it's a side topic, but that 7210 application packet has a bunch of stuff in it. It'd be great if everybody's familiar with what comes in there. And we can provide in a follow-up email the reminder information about how to order those.
Thanks. And then Alma clarified that she's talking about if they're making money, self-employed, and getting paid by cash. If that cash, if they're holding it under their bed and they haven't reported it, then there's no way for us to find it. If that is deposited into a bank account, then we can find it via AVS, or you know, they can provide bank statements or whatever. But yeah, so I mean, if it's cash, it's still potentially accountable. If they said I have $10,000 under my mattress at home, then we're going to say, okay, that's $10,000 in resources, and it is countable.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
All
I'm
right.
also looking for the questions here.
And I think we do have the questions about, you know, like, when will people need an MSC 2639 form? And they will know because it will be asked by someone in their interview, and they will get mail. We won't be able to see it on the CP side because it lives outside of one right now, but we will ask for it if we need it as a piece of clarification.
And you could expect that every time you see this screen that I'm showing on the webinar right now, which is the resource questions screen, and then it asks about all the individual resources. Whenever you see that, you can expect that we will need to run AVS, because a client will report their resources here on the application. Then during the interview, the worker will collect more information about those resources. And then the agency needs to verify that that reported information is accurate and it is complete. In order to do that, we will then run AVS. So every time you see this, it starts a process that will end, or not, maybe not end, but lead to running AVS, and we will need the MSC 2639 permission form in order to undertake that part of the resource verification process.
Hey, this is Hillary. I'm a process consultant on the eligibility transformation team, and I just wanted to point out one of the reasons that we say that the AVS consent will be gathered during the signature, if at all, or sorry, during the interview, if at all possible, is because we can get a verbal signature on that 2639, so we don't necessarily need the form itself signed. The easiest and the fastest way to get that consent done is with the verbal signature with the eligibility worker. So that's always going to be your best option. And again, if we can't get that for any reason, then we'll send the form, but it's not always going to be a form. They can call the VEC, they can call their local APD AAA office and get that verbal signature as well.
That is such a great clarification. Thank you, Hillary, for chiming in on that. That is another reason why it might just be easier and better to not worry about it at the time of application, but just to wait until that process plays out in the non-Magi interview. But I do want to mention that even though the workers can collect a verbal signature for that form, community partners cannot. So you cannot sign it remotely have it signed remotely for your clients. Only workers can do that.
But one thing that you can do that's helpful is remind folks that who are having an interview that this may come up and that it may be good to have their spouse nearby in order to verbally sign as well. Because if they're not there on the phone, then there may still be a document that gets mailed and needs to be returned.
Indeed. All right, are there any other questions, or should we wrap this up?
I think we're good. Feel free to keep keying things in, but I also know we have only about 5 minutes left, so we should probably make sure we wrap up.
We did have somebody earlier, Jessica, who was willing to share a process. Like, I'm guessing we've stopped recording now. But even if we didn't,
We have not.
it's okay. It's all right. We can always cut off the end. There was somebody earlier who wanted to share a process about the remote signature on the consent form, I believe. And I think if we have a few extra minutes, I wonder if we can have Alexandra share that information with us. So I'm going to read it. And it says, she says, I was able to figure out an easy way to enter an electronic signature through the PDF form, which means the PDF authorization form specifically, not the MSC 2639. Now we're talking again about the consent or authorization form. She said, if time allows, if anyone's interested, I can show you how to do it or tell you how to do it. So I would ask our attendees, is that something that is of interest to you? Oh, we have more questions here. I want to answer the questions about the topics first. And I'm going to call out this one. How will a client be notified of the in-person interview? I think actually we might have answered that.
So an interview, which may be in person or over the phone, people will get an RFI just like they would for income or immigration status, except it'll say some details about the interview. And we have an interview guide that I will hunt for.
And perhaps Hillary or Janelle can chime in with any additional information about that.
They will, yeah, they will get a notice saying, hey, we need to talk to you. And they can give us a call.
Okay.
We will, if we have a application received and an interview is required, when we pull that application to work, an eligibility worker will also reach out to them to try to either complete an appointment or to schedule an appointment.
And I know that on the RFI notice that they get, there's also a special number they can call to directly conduct that interview over the phone.
Yep, exactly.
Yep. And if anybody, we can also send out, just for fun, the guide to non-Magi interviews that we created and shared so that you have that as a resource at your fingertips. We can send it as a follow-up.
I also did see a question about developmental disability and long-term care benefits was in here. I kind of wanted to just give it a quick little overview because I believe that long-term care is going to be something we'll be talking about in a future webinar, but there are sort of screening questions in the sense that it one will ask, you know, does this individual need help with tasks such as bathing, eating, that kind of thing? And so those questions, if answered yes, will start the process of referring that person to our central coordinator unit, who will then find out which APD office they need to go to. That APD office will then do a full screening to determine whether they are APD long-term care or DD long-term care and potential eligibility there, and then get an assessment set up after that.
Great, thank you. And another question here. Somebody's client received an interview appointment letter stating that their phone appointment was at 7 a.m. Is that normal procedure, and can they request a different time if needed?
So I would say it's not that often you see them that early, because most offices open at 8, but it is a possibility. Especially if it's like a VAC or a phone interview is going to have much better chance of doing that. I wouldn't say we see it too often, but they can absolutely request a different time. If that appointment time and date doesn't work for them, they can call back and reschedule.
Thank you.